golfers, welcome to Caddy Chat. I'm your host, Jacob Arvidsson. I'm joined by
Josh Wood.
And we are happy to bring you the new podcast that we've come up with, sponsored and hosted on our channel for Leprechaun Hollows here in West Michigan. We're excited to talk to you guys about disc golf and about a lot of things that go on behind the scene. Josh, you want to dive into that a little bit, what we're going for here with the podcast?
Yeah, our goal is to be kind of the players podcast. We want to provide content that benefits you, whether it's how you can improve your own game, running tournaments, running leagues, helpful tips for mental game, just the all-around player for your average player.
Yeah, so a little bit about us. We're not just two bozos who showed up wanting to make a podcast. We do enjoy the game of disc golf. We do find ourselves and think of ourselves as semi-knowledgeable. I run a league here in West Michigan. I've been playing for almost a decade now. I consider myself a high amateur player, slightly above average. I have a strong forehand and a slacking backhand. We're trying to improve in that area. And I live here in West Michigan. I got a wife, I got a daughter, and I enjoy the sport.
Yeah, me too. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm also born and raised here in West Michigan. Been here over 4 decades and love the sport of disc golf. I've been playing since the late 90s on and off, been serious for the last few years. I also help run leagues around West Michigan at Winstrom Preserve and Shore Acres, as well as a fall league there at Breakers, and run a lot of tournaments out here. Passionate about the sport, passionate about the players, and trying to make the sport better and make the players better.
Absolutely.
And I would not say I'm an above average player. I'm a solid 890 to 910 rated golfer.
I love it. So in this podcast, like we mentioned, we're going to talk a lot about, power to the player stuff and a lot of behind the scenes tournament league stuff that you don't normally hear on other podcasts. You know, Josh and I have been talking a lot about how you tune into a disc golf podcast. You hear a lot about form tips. You hear a lot about what's going on nationally, who won X, Y, and Z tournament. If you're a big disc golf fan like we are, you already know that information. You're already keeping up with it. You're watching the coverage, and you're just up to date for the most part about what's going on in the world of disc golf already. So we want to give you something that's a little bit different. We want to connect you still with what's going on nationally. We will recap briefly what's going on, but when we do recap, we're going to be talking a lot about something that happened a little bit deeper in the tournament. Maybe some stat that exposes something that you wouldn't have picked up just looking at the results or watching
a
it
rising
live.
Star you might never see on coverage, but had an amazing round.
Exactly. So we want to highlight those people nationally, and we also want to highlight those same people locally. So you'll see us bring on guests onto the show that are more local to us in Michigan. Specifically, we're targeting amateurs who might have tore it up at a tournament, or local pros that don't necessarily get the national recognition that they may deserve for having a round that they deserve recognition for. So we'll bring them on the show. We'll talk to them. We'll give them a little bit of highlights, and we'll really pump up our local scene while still adhering to everybody else nationally that might not know us here in West Michigan.
Yeah, and actually we talked about doing this nationally too. So, I mean, if there's something that happened at a local tournament, a hot round, or maybe your favorite TD who just did an outstanding job, feel free to leave a comment. Let us know. We'd love your feedback on that so we can highlight that sort of grassroots disc golf all over the country.
Absolutely. So to start, let's start with some national recaps since that's what everyone's familiar. This past weekend, we had the biggest tournament going on was the Myrtle Beach Open.
Myrtle Beach Open.
Down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Beautiful weekend down there. To my knowledge, sounds like it was 80 degrees, past peak beach season, so I'm sure the players enjoyed their time on the beach.
Yeah.
With some beautiful weather. And,
within a half a mile from the beach, I think they were.
Yeah, they're right across the street.
Right across the street, within a tenth of a mile.
Yeah, so
maybe.
Yeah, they're right there. Hopefully they enjoyed that aspect of the tournament.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Tell us what happened.
Well, first of all, I'm jealous. It's probably nice and warm down there, and I'm freezing. But yeah, there was some good golf being played. Isaac Robinson won on the MPO side with a 25 down, and just edged out Danny Beaucamp and Joel Freeman. Joel Freeman too is putting together a fantastic round. If you've watched some of the last few weeks of disc golf, Joel Freeman really he had an outstanding year.
He
Joel
really
Freeman did.
Yep.
There's a couple of stories we could tell about Joel Freeman this year. One actually that I've got pulled up we can talk about later. But Isaac Robinson at the Myrtle Beach Open was just shredding. The man, when he is on, he is just spot on and throws some amazing shots and some great scrambles, but he didn't even have to scramble all that much. He was hitting his lines, hitting fairways, parking shots, and banging putts like he always does.
And he's going to be one, we kind of saw it with Gannon Bird last year, kind of arrive on the scene, show up in, what was it, Vegas, right, with Drew Gibson.
Yep.
And people were kind of like, oh, he might be good. And sure enough, he's pretty good.
He is pretty good.
I mean, a year and a half removed from that, and he's a stalwart. He's, in my opinion, clear, like head and shoulders clear top 10, if not top 5.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I think we're going to see the same thing from Isaac Robinson next year. I think we're going to be talking this time next year like he's clear top 10.
Yep, I agree.
There's no doubt about it. He's going to be hitting the tour full time next year. Now that he's done with school, and
there's some guys you see that they come on they get on coverage, and they have a couple of hot rounds, and maybe they're on coverage a couple times that year and do really well, and for whatever reason, you don't see him again for a long time. But Isaac was one of those guys that the first time he was on coverage, you could just tell he was calm, cool, collected, playing his game, playing it well, and has just continued to get better throughout the year. So
and that's
I'm really excited.
That's really the key.
Yeah.
Cool, calm, and collected. There's a lot of people with the skill set to compete, but the head game's not there, and he's clearly got the head game dialed in, along with some rather skillful shots and some killer putting. So that always helps.
Yeah, and I will say, too, we haven't seen his brother so much yet, but I think we will. Ezra is also a phenomenal golfer. I'm a coverage junkie, and I watch all the channels, and I've seen these guys on coverage for a couple of years now in some local A tiers and some other events where they're from. And so his brother is oftentimes neck and neck with him in those tournaments, and I look forward to seeing him on the Pro Tour make a splash as well.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Isaac's going to steal the headlines right now, but Ezra's there. He's lurking in the shadows.
It's like the Schultz brothers. They're coming too.
And he's young. He's younger than Isaac.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to factor that into the development too.
Sure.
If he's this close to Isaac now, and we're already proclaiming Isaac is going to be top 10 next year, then where does that put Ezra? I mean,
I'm excited about 23. He's
going to be right on his tail. The other thing we want to highlight about the Myrtle Beach Open is on the women's side, Deanne Carey.
Deanne Carey with a hot round.
She won, deservedly so.
Yes.
But the first round was disgustingly good. 10-12 rated, and just blew away the field, really.
Yeah.
And eventually coasted to a 3-stroke win, 19 down.
Yeah, it was 3 strokes over Rebecca Cox. And Holly Finley was 3 behind that yet.
Okay. So yeah, the final round, I mean, she tied with Rebecca Cox. They both shot a 51. Yeah. She was in control. So
absolutely in control. It was phenomenal golf again. I think she averaged around 970 rated golf for the weekend.
So a 10-12 in round 1 in the FBO division, generally, it's helpful.
It's pretty hot.
Yeah, it's helpful to get the W. So congrats to Deanne.
Yeah,
well done there.
Great win. And now it's time for our tip of the month. So in the spirit of trying to help you improve, being the Players Podcast and trying to bring content that's gonna benefit you, every week we would like to feature something different. And so one week we're gonna do tip of the month. Next week we'll do disc of the month, and then we'll talk about the rule of the month, because we all know there's people out there playing disc golf that do not know the rules, and certainly some of the deeper rules that just don't come up in a regular round of golf. So we'll do that, but this week it's going to be tip of the month, and our tip of the month this month is know yourself, know your disc. Because something else we've talked about before, Jake, is a lot of times you'll see people on the course who maybe they're new to disc golf, and they're watching some of the local pros or the local amateurs who throw really well, and they're trying to mimic the discs that they're throwing and mimic the shots that they're throwing, but they're just not there yet. You know, we see this all the time with new kids coming along, 15, 16 years old. They just get into disc golf. They're watching Paul McBeth step up to a 300-foot hole, 400-foot hole, and throw a Luna. And so the next time they get up to a 300-foot hole, they think, oh, I should throw my Luna. But that's not who they are. That's not their game. And so one of the most important things I've found in my game is knowing how my discs fly with my form where it's at right now. Obviously, I want to improve my form. Obviously, I want to be able to throw a Luna 400 feet, or actually a Wizard. I don't really care about Lunas, but sure, I'd love to do that someday. But that's not me today, and so I'm not going to do that in a game, certainly that counts. If it's a league or a tournament round, I'm not going to be doing that. So I know when I come up to a 270-foot hole that there's certain discs in my wheelhouse that I can throw that far accurately, and it might not be the same as Paul McBeth. It's not going to be the same as Jacob Arvidsson, because Jake, you throw a little farther than me. So I might be throwing a destroyer on a hole that you're throwing a mid-range or a fairway driver, and that's okay. So knowing yourself, knowing your discs is hugely important to improving your game and to playing well.
And the other thing we can pull from that is the idea of different discs fitting what you're looking for. A lot of the time, Josh and I were talking before the show today, a lot of the time you'll see these guys new to the game, even people that have been playing for years and have some experience, they fall in love with a certain manufacturer, for example, and they'll have, 8 different discs in their bag that they throw the majority of the time that are, for example, Innova discs. But the discs that they're looking for to fill one of the slots that they don't have, they go straight to Innova because it fits, what the other discs they're trying to throw and that they feel comfortable throwing. So they go back to the brand that they trust, which is great. You should throw a brand that you trust. But at the end of the day, the disc that you're looking for that shot shape to fit in your bag in that spot, the best disc for you might not be from Innova. It might be a Trilogy disc. It might be from Discraft. It might be from who knows where. I mean,
be willing to branch out.
Yeah, there's plenty of manufacturers out there on the market that make good plastic.
Yeah.
And, so many of them fly with, if you look them up on Infinite Disc, for example, they all have the flight charts. So many of them fly very similar to each other. Yeah. If you look at the flight chart, you'd say, oh, it's identical to X, Y, and Z from all the other molds. But the difference between them is how they feel in your hand. They have different rim sizes. They have different feel in the plastic. They have different plastic types. So that's my biggest thing with know yourself, know your disc for our tip of the month is be willing to branch out, because because your manufacturer that you feel the most comfortable with and you identify with the most, just because they have a disc in a certain slot that you're missing in your bag, based off of the flight pattern, just because they have that flight pattern in their lineup doesn't mean that that's the best disc for you. Just based on how it feels in your hand, because you're dealing with difference of power, you're dealing with people with different grip strength, even forehand, backhand. The flight pattern is infinite.
And it's also interesting too when you throw a new disc how much you learn about yourself and your own form. It's one of the reasons I love going through my bag and pulling something out that's been in there a couple of years and getting a brand new one. Or like you said, going to another manufacturer and getting something with the same numbers and throwing that. It's always fascinating to see, some of your tendencies get exposed when you throw new discs, and you can learn a little bit more about your own form. Absolutely.
So, tip of the month, know yourself, know your disc. Don't look at everybody else. The biggest thing I had, the example that I had actually in a recent tournament this past year was, I'm not a backhand bomber. I throw far forehand, but I don't chuck it backhand. And we step up to in a tournament on a backhand friendly hole, righty backhand, and I'm playing with 3 dudes who can smash the disc. And they step up casual righty backhand with fairway drivers, and they crush it 400 feet. I don't have 400 feet with a distance driver. But watching them throw the fairway drivers, the tendency then is for me to step up. And I do know I have enough experience to know I can't get a fairway driver that far. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe I can get a distance driver that far and give myself a circle 2 putt.
Yeah.
So I step up there with a fast disc in my hand, trying to at least get semi close to what they just did, when in reality, I'm never getting to that pin for a birdie look.
Yeah.
From any like I might
Play
throw
your
it.
par.
I might throw it in from distance, yes.
Sure.
But I'm never going to park the hole.
Right.
So in that situation, yeah, I gave in. I threw something beefy, and it worked out for me. I still parred the hole. It just dumped
But
out
it wasn't
in the
the best
fairway.
way to play.
Yeah, it was an unintelligent way to play the hole.
Unintelligent. Yes.
Yeah, if I could have just thrown even a forehand straight to cut the hole in half and then pitched up.
Yeah, and let's be honest too. Sometimes it's not just maybe I think I can get there this time. Sometimes there's a little pride.
Yep.
And you think these younger guys are throwing fairway drivers. I should throw a fairway driver. I don't want to look like the weak old man.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for myself. You're not old, Jake. But I get that too. I get that. That happens.
The other example would be on the flip side, shorter holes. So many times you see a hole under 200 feet or something. The tendency or the book would say throw a putter.
Throw a putter, yeah.
Or maybe an overstable mid-range or something like that. When in reality, if you know yourself and you know your discs, the best shot for you in that situation might be to throw a Firebird. It might be to throw a Destroyer, because
you can control it.
It's predictable and you know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And you can hit that distance much more consistently than you can with a putter. So
yeah, because a lot of times too, it's a lot more accurate to throw a disc at 50% than to chuck something that might go that far, but it's not going to be as accurate.
So you just said it. The big word there is trust. Know yourself, know your discs. It comes down to trust. Trust yourself, trust your discs, and it'll work out for you. I promise. Yeah. So we're going to keep this episode short since it's our first go at it. We don't want to bore you guys too much. So you turn us off this quickly. Hopefully you're still watching. But
hi, Mom.
But we want to tease our next episode, what you guys can look forward to. Josh, you want to touch on that? What these guys can look for next week?
Absolutely. Next week, we are going to talk about the disc of the month. That's going to be our monthly segment there. We're also going to make some predictions about some upcoming events, including next season in general. Who's going to be hot? Who are we going to want to watch?
Who's going to be hot? Who's going to be not?
Who's going to be not next year? Yeah, and then we're going to start with some tourney talk, and we're going to talk about some of the first steps to setting up a tournament. We're going to talk about course directors, townships, approval, things like that, all the nitty gritty. We're going to do some local highlights, and then what we would really like too is, even in regard to next week's episode, is some audience feedback here. And so as we're talking about these tourney talks, and we're talking about how to set up a tournament, we're going to talk about how to run a league, how to set up a league. We want to hear from you. What are some things you've learned along the way as you've run tournaments or leagues, or what's keeping you from it? What are some of the holdups that make you nervous and make you not run a tournament or a league?
And on the other side of the token, those of you that are just strictly players that aren't running tournaments, aren't running leagues, obviously not everybody's cut out to do that, and we can't have everybody running tournaments and leagues. We'd have too many people in charge at that point. So those of you that are just players, that are gung-ho and everyday disc golf warriors that are out in the course trying to rack up as many events as you can, what are your thoughts on the matter? What do you think is important to set up a tournament? What do you
like to see?
Yeah.
What don't you like to see?
What would you do first? What do you like to see tournament directors in your area do first? And on the other side, what do you not want to see? When you see a tournament director in your area announce a tournament and do X, Y, or Z, what's wrong?
Some red flags?
What are the red flags?
Yeah.
What do you not want to see? So leave a comment below. We need your feedback. We love your feedback, and we will base the show off your feedback. So the more engagement we get, the better. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching episode 1 of Caddy Chat
with Jake and Josh.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week.